Welcome to episode 4 of Reshaping Leicester Tigers. I'm going to attempt an accent here as I welcome you in. So before we start, let's just build some context around today's guest. He's self-confessed most popular man at Leicester Tigers, self-appointed biggest off-season signing in the club's history, and you know, all round good guy, funny man. And I can't remember what else you told me to say when I introed you, but look, let's go for it. So it's Arled Walters. Is that right? Or have I done it wrong?
Yeah, you've done it wrong. After that massive build-up, it's just Arled. You forgot that I'm actually reigning Burt Reynolds lookalike champion, like old Burt Reynolds as well. So I won that 2 years in a row now. So if you can add that to your list, please.
I'm not as old as you, so I might have to Google who Burt Reynolds is after this, if that's okay. Look, let's get down to it. We've obviously had some chats with, you know, the big dogs at the top of the tree. We've spoken to Scott Clark around, obviously, the club and how we're actually trying to get back into the community, which has been really impacted. We spoke to the, you know, Prince of Darkness himself last week, Steve. I'm imagining you watched that because he probably said, everyone's got to watch it, make notes, tell me how I was. So we thought we'd go down to the bottom of the pile today and go down, you know.
The yappy little terrier after the big dogs.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And let's be honest, between you and I, this could go on for some time. So, but I'm going to open with a very simple question. What is ahead of physical performance?
Ooh. In old language, it's fitness coach. That's probably the easiest way to describe it. But I suppose how this position has evolved a bit now. My current position then, so I'd lead across the departments of the performance departments. So strength and conditioning, fitness, medical, sports science, nutrition, and then in each of those departments, there's a lead in each of those. So I work closely with those guys.
So we'll touch a little bit later.
I'm sorry, and obviously working closely then with the coaches. So I'm really the bridge between the fitness, the performance side of things, and the coaching.
It sounds silly, and again, I'm getting you to probably go more down the industry side than necessarily Tigers, but performance, you can understand that's kind of the last decade it's come out and been the real used term, hasn't it, for these kind of coaches. And why is it performance? Because you could argue performance is a scrum coach. You could argue a performance is a line out. What's the thinking there, and why necessarily do you, I guess, go under that banner?
Geez, that's a good question, isn't it?
Yeah. It could just be that HR said, that's what we're calling you. It could be that simple, mate.
Exactly. I suppose you've got development streams, don't you? And performance streams. Like one of my main tasks in a week is to work closely enough with Steve to make sure that we perform, and we perform on a consistent basis. So yes, you're always nudging performance and development. And some weeks you're pushing one maybe more than the other, if that makes sense. But yeah, performance is making sure that everything is going in the right direction, in short.
So obviously, two proud Welshmen here on the call. I'm obviously a New South Welshman, but, you know, nice way to work that pun in because I like to use it. But look, you're a well-known figure in rugby. You're a well-known figure, obviously, on the sideline for a World Cup winning team. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But I'm intrigued as to your rugby career as a player.
Well, I suppose the best way to introduce that, I was a proper, in English terms, I was a proper rugby nose. My father was a massive Llanelli fan with Scarlets, but so from the age of about 5, I had a season ticket, and we'd go to all the home and away games. So when I was young, you know, you'd have away games in Gloucester, Coventry, you know, and Moseley, places like that, Leicester. So we travel everywhere to watch. So I was mad into rugby. You know, you'd start playing in primary school all the way through. Now, I'm probably one of the most athletically challenged S&C coaches out there, or whatever term you want to give, but I was dog shit as a rugby player. And I realized that quite early as well, you know. So I was a 9, but I was useless. I couldn't pass, couldn't kick. I was slow, you know, so I didn't really have the ingredients to go anywhere. But I had loads of chat, you know. I had loads of chat. So that was really about it. But I was very, I was more on the social side of rugby. I enjoyed it, but anyway, because I was so into rugby, I figured out quite early I needed a different path to get into working. You know, when rugby went professional, I was about 15. So yeah, I knew quite soon I need to do something different to get into rugby, because that's what I wanted to do. That's all I wanted to do, you know.
I'm quite intrigued. You said dog shit. I really like to touch on that because it's quite nice knowing that you're not good at something. I'm quite enjoying that.
Yeah.
So talk us through your dad. Talk us through when rugby was introduced to you. Do you remember your first away trip? Do you remember the first game you went to see Llanelli?
Yeah, like Llanelli played my hometown, or the neighbouring town, in the Welsh Cup, Llandovery. I remember going there to watch that game, and I wouldn't expect you to know him, but Ray Gravel broke his leg in that game. Now, this guy is an absolute Llanelli legend, you know, played for Wales, the Lions, everything. So that was probably around 1985, something like that. You know, I was that guy, I was that boy who'd go and complain that my feet are cold, like 5 minutes into the game. So I'd get a couple of clips from my old man and be like, oh, get on with it, you know. But yeah, from there, my fascination grew, you know. The match program was like gold dust, you know. So I've got 2 sisters, so it was always going to be programs mine after every game. So yeah, we just go and watch as many games as possible. And I was always, you know, when I don't know if it's the same in New South Wales, but when you played rugby up to a certain age, you know, it was always Sunday mornings. When that became youth rugby and playing on Saturdays, I was like, I can't go and watch the games now. So I was torn a bit, you know. At 16, 17, I'm going, I'd actually rather go and watch the game than play, because I didn't enjoy how I played. So yeah, it was really early on, but yeah, I was obsessed. I was obsessed with Llanelli. I was obsessed with rugby as a whole. You know, I remember '87 World Cup. That's a real standout for getting up really, really early in the morning to watch the third place playoff when Paul Thorburn kicks the conversion to win the game against Australia for the bronze. You know, so that's an early memory of actually being like, you know, I'd get up at 3 a.m. on a Saturday when Scotland were touring New Zealand. Like, who does that kind of stuff, you know? But yeah,
As you said, Norsers do
it. Yeah, exactly.
I like that you threw in there that you beat Australia. It doesn't count though, because I wasn't born. So talk me through your CV then, because you have done this job, or build up to this job in, correct me if I'm wrong, so Wales, New Zealand, Australia, Ireland, South Africa, Leicester.
Yeah.
You know, without being rude, you haven't spent decades at places. You've moved around. Is there a reason for that? Is it always been a case of, I guess, the job offer comes and you look at it? Are you someone who is not necessarily looking beyond the role you're in, but also always wanting to find a new challenge, a new way of doing something, learning from different people?
Yeah, there's definitely that. There's never really looking past what you're doing currently, but opportunities come up, and life's too short. You know, I never traveled. I had no interest in traveling until all of a sudden there's a job come up in New Zealand. You go, I'd quite like to do that. And you know, I'm fortunate as well that my wife, you know, she's really happy to, you know, try different things in terms of, right then, let's go to South Africa, you know. Yeah, why not? So that's the only reason I can do it. Otherwise, yeah, I would be spending decades in one place. But yeah, it always intrigued me how things were done differently in different places. And I think I've mentioned sometime before as well that if you stay in the same place all the time, it's almost difficult. How do you how do you find out new things? You know, there's only so many books, podcasts, and everything you can listen to or read until you go somewhere and you experience something completely different, which inevitably will shape you in how you coach, how you approach things. You know, so yeah, that I wouldn't have done it any other way, to be honest.
I know you said you were a rugby nose, and we'll move beyond the topic of you in a minute, I promise. But you do see quite often in your industry, if you will, in performance in S&C, guys or girls bouncing around sports. You know, they might go and work with Olympians. They might go and work at, I know universities are a huge area where there's constant stream of athletes in and out. You've always had rugby. Is it for you, is that the niche? Is that the market you want to be in always? Or have you, I guess, I would assume you've had offers to move outside of rugby union, you know, rugby league's one that's very simply moved across to. You see football. It's the same in the medical field, isn't it? You can do your job in that space. But for you, is it always rugby union?
Yeah, to be blunt, you know, who knows what might come up in the future? No idea. But no, I've just a real passion for rugby union. I couldn't imagine myself. This funny story, years and years ago, probably about 2007, I actually applied for a role with the English Institute of Sport. I think it was in Bath, from memory. I'm not really thinking too much about it, but I thought, I'll apply for it. And it was to do with modern pentathlon and something else. I can't remember what it was. And the morning that I was meant to go to Bath for the interview, I just thought, I couldn't imagine myself getting excited. And all the respect in the world to modern pentathletes and everything that, you know, those guys do. But yeah, I just get really excited, you know, the training, seeing how preparation affects how you play at the weekend. How can you manipulate that best you can? How can you influence that best you can to see, you know, the fruits of your work? It's just rugby union, I think.
I'll tell you an interesting story. Modern pentathlon, and one for people watching and fans watching, it's actually the number one passion of Dan Coles. So when you next see him, if you're doing a Q&A, or if you see him at a game when fans are welcome back at Matty Hollywood's Welford Road, ask him, because he is obsessed with it. He loves it. He'll talk you through the whole history, and he really wants to talk about it. He'll act like he doesn't, but I would suggest having that conversation with Coley if you can. You might do it as well.
He's forever trying to get fencing into the gym, you know. It's like,
just give me a second while I Google modern pentathlon, because I've got no idea what I'm talking about. So I'm quite intrigued to move away from you necessarily, but I'm quite intrigued. So I've been fortunate to see people do S&C roles in the various places I've worked as well. And I hope I'm not being too blunt, or I hope I'm not being presumptuous by saying you are quite unique in the way you approach your role. I would say most that I've seen, if there's a spectrum, there's kind of the old school flog them until they're exhausted and they're just constantly going to get fit by, you know, that old school, I guess, rugby league, running up sandhills or getting them up at 3 a.m. with alarms and running them around pitches. But then there's the really scientific approach of constant, you know, individualization and, you know, mechanics and weighing them and looking at the numbers and whatever else. I would say you sit a bit of both, if that's fair, but you're probably, to me anyway, and again, I'm being presumptuous, there's kind of a culture you bring to it. If it's science first culture, there's a way in which you kind of push them. There's a way in which you engage with them that's a little bit different than just being an S&C coach. Am I on the money? Is that something you try and do? You don't try and be one or the other?
I don't know how to answer that necessarily, because I suppose it took a while. I've been doing this now for about 16 years. It took a while for me to just find my own personality, and just, you know, my mentors when I started were quite different, but they were imposing characters, and I thought I had to be like that. So it took a while. It probably took me about 5-6 years, maybe 7, you know, to actually figure out, just, it's way easier, and it takes less energy to just be me and whatever feels right for the environment that you're in. So I might not necessarily be the same now as what I was with South Africa, what I was with Munster, you know, but yeah, I just find I'm pretty comfortable in how I do things, and you know, otherwise we have to reflect. I rely on other people to say it's not working. Um, but yeah, what you mentioned there, geez, you have to engage with them, don't you? You know, so, and this is quite unique, an industry or a role where you you want to get guys on a very consistent basis to work really, really hard for you. And I don't think you can do that without actually appreciating what they do and engaging with them and actually show the, you consider the human side of things as well, rather than just numbers. You need to achieve this and that's it. But sprinkle in some of the old school stuff. I'd say if we had some sand dunes in Wigston, you wouldn't put it past us from taking them to the sand dunes once in a while as well. You adapt to the environment, don't you? So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I think if I can, yeah, probably not, but who cares? If I can put some context on it for anyone watching, one thing I've seen you do, which I personally never really seen an S&C coach do, and this might sound really silly to people outside, is if someone has a birthday in an office, there's cake, right? You very rarely see the S&C guys go for the cake. They're never going to have some. Now, that's their choice. I personally will definitely have some. But you will too. Now, that sounds really silly, but do you get my point in terms of you do never really see those S&C guys get into the cake or have the, I don't know, glass of wine, or they might eat the, fries, whatever it may be in the meal. It sounds silly, but you will go for that. You're not stuck on the science, but for anyone watching, there's a hell of a lot of work you do that goes in behind the scenes and everything that's put out. It's not just an afterthought or on the day. Do you get my point in terms of where I'm coming around that point?
Yeah, look, if there's cake in the office, if it's someone's birthday, and if you've left any over, I'll take the scraps. I'll get in for the scraps, but only if there's something left over. No, man, I love cake. I'm drinking this delicious water. It's again, I don't know when this is going out. It's a Friday afternoon. I'd love a Guinness right now. I thought I'd better have a water when I'm on this lovely call with you. So, man, life's too short, isn't it? If it's your grand's birthday and there's cake, eat some cake, and it's like that. Now, that's that's just me. I don't really worry too much about that.
So you spoke about, let's get into the Tigers stuff. So you've been here 9 months now, better part of 9 months. You obviously started the same day as Steve, 1st of July. Same day as a lot of the new guys that came in during that break. I asked Steve the same question last week, and there's a story that emerged and everyone's picked up on it around a certain session where Steve told some blokes to pack it up, go home. Everyone wants to know who that is. I'm not going to ask you. That's fine. And for those who have asked, it wasn't me. I came back in great nick.
Great nick.
Yeah, great nick. What I'm intrigued, the same question I asked him is what did you immediately identify? And call a spade, you will have looked at games before you arrived. There's a whole bunch of research. You would have conversations with people, with Steve, whatever it may be. What did you immediately identify that needed changing that you could have an influence on at Leicester Tigers?
Fitness.
Yeah, so just simple answer. Talk me through that.
Look, I have to say this now with the caveat that when I started, the guys had been in lockdown, the guys had been away from the club and training by themselves, and a lot of players struggle to work as hard as they should when they're training by themselves, So I did bear that in mind, but I was initially pretty disappointed with where the running fitness or the running levels were. And that particular day, that group, I spoke to them at the end of their fitness test, the running test, the Bronco, and expressed my disappointment at. So I don't think that's a bad thing to do. We both myself and Steve different. I didn't know what lens he was looking through. I knew what lens I was looking through, and I expect a certain standard, and it wasn't going to be the time where I'd kind of relax those standards, because I'd watched games. I'd definitely did my homework before coming, and I'd noticed some, not all players, but some players weren't as active off the ball, expect. So yeah, that's probably it. I'm not sure if I've answered everything you want there, but yeah, that was probably the area that I thought, right, there we need to address this pretty quickly, and particularly the forwards. So that really, I came in knowing full well that was going to be the area that I'd want us to target as a department.
All right, I get that, and I'm intrigued to dig a little bit deeper. What are you looking at when a player off the ball? Because on the ball, if a bloke runs through someone, he's strong. If a bloke's running down the wing and he runs past someone, he's fast, right? They're easily identifiable kind of USPs or characteristics. That's fine. What are you looking at a bloke off the ball, particularly? So, and I'm not saying name names, but what are you looking at around guys who are off the ball in terms of if they're fit, if they're into it, if they're working hard enough, where the standards are? What is it?
Simply, are they getting into position as quickly as they can? So the first thing, if they're on the ground, how quickly do they get back onto their feet, and how quickly are they running and getting back into position? So are they able to get up? Yes. How long does it take them to get up? Evaluate that. How long does it take them to get into position? So that level of urgency, I think I definitely gauge, or I judge a player by what he feels for his teammates. Is he getting into position and then being able to be vocal in that position to give energy? Is he giving energy to his teammates, or is he taking his time getting back to his feet, slowly getting back into position and giving them nothing? So I think the work off the ball, and sometimes, it's harder for fans now. Supporters that are home watching on TV, and you see the guy that you've just mentioned, the guy who's making the tackle, the guy who's making the carry. You're not seeing the guys who are slow to get back into position out of shot. So we really appreciate that here. So it's those guys, and different teams have different names for it, but how do you make your teammates feel? How much energy do you give your teammates by getting into position and being vocal, and then, being able to manipulate the opposition? So yeah, those are a couple of things we like to see off the ball anyway. And then, you want to see how impactful the player is. So how many times does a player actually carry? Do you see a player carry once up, and then you don't see him for 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden there's another big moment? So those kind of players, typically when you play French teams, you'll get the big players, some lazy, and they'll have a massive moment. They're like, wow, in terms of the game, that's a massive game defining moment. But that might only happen 4 times a game because they don't have the appetite to work, or they don't have the capacity or the capability to do it. So that's really what we're trying to drive.
What I'm intrigued as well is how and I'll touch on a point Steve raised as well, that you have an ability to get players to find a bit more, or to want to actually find a bit more. So not only are you pushing them to be better, get fitter, be faster, whatever it may be stronger. Steve's always harped on about how you have this ability to make them want to find a bit more. So they are professional athletes at the end of the day. Now, yes, rugby's unique because they're not all, 100-meter runner professional athletes, so to speak, and not knocking the front rowers, but you know where I'm getting at. And, some outside backs, let's be honest. But my point is, before I get abused by every outside back out there, but I'm not saying anyone specific either, just so that we don't get into a fight over it, because he will come for me. what I'm intrigued about is how you do that, because these guys are professional athletes. They're not standing in the middle of the field, twizzling hair or looking around at the birds in the sky. They're working hard every day. So when you say they're not working hard enough, one, what's their reaction to that? And two, how do you then make them want to be better?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, like how do you engage with the player in the first place? Like I should never care more about a player's performance than what he does. And those are the players you typically go, what's he going to do for you? Probably very little. He's probably the guy off the ball who doesn't really work because he doesn't really care. Doesn't care about his own performance, doesn't care about the team's performance. So how do you get those guys? Look,
is it individual? Is it about the individual and you picking up things about them?
Yeah, it probably is. And look, I'm very lucky that I'm part of a department. I'm a part of a team where you've got coaches who are really clear on what they want the player to do. So you get in that nudge. Then you've got other fitness coaches, other guys in the department, like the Matt Pars, the James Nolans, the guys. They will also push the guys. So it's not just me. It's not just me pushing, but that's part of my job then, is to try and squeeze a little bit out. And it's finding how to get that done. It's very individual. It's understanding the motivations of the player and what he's committed to do. Really having that kind of agreement, that kind of contract between you and that guy to say, I'm going to put as much into you as what you put into your development and inevitably your performance. So yeah, it's finding what works for different individuals, I suppose.
So while that's individual, in a broad term, philosophically speaking, what makes performance-wise, physically-wise, what brings success to rugby players currently in the game? Because the game evolves and goes around in cycles in different ways and its styles play differently. But what do you think philosophically from your point of view is the way you said? I think you said something about a front five being fitter than everyone else, but also there's an argument you want your front five to be the biggest, strongest, baddest blokes too for when it comes to scrum time. So philosophically, where are you at in terms of the game right now? What makes successful athletes and players?
But typically the more successful athletes and players have a balance of those things, have a balance of being able to move really, really well, having that urgency to get into position, all those things that we've spoken about. But I see very little players looking really successful outside of a really well-aligned plan in terms of the rugby, so if a player and the players, the squad, the team play to an aligned way of doing it, so tactically disciplined, they typically look better for that. They're more efficient in that. And then our job as the sports staff, I suppose, is to make them, to give them the physical characteristics. So I suppose what do we look for there? Yeah, just as fit for purpose as possible. And what I mean by that is, does the front five, what's your first job? Set piece. Give us dominance of the set piece. What's your second job? Probably to give us width in defense. What's your third job? It's probably go and hit. So when you prioritize like that, you can go, okay, this is what you need. This is what you have to have. These are the things you have to have. These are the things that's nice to have. It's always nice to have the prop who's absolutely rapid. So like a Genji, but then you go, well, what does he have to have? He has, the big rocks that he also needs as well. He wouldn't be an international Lucid prop if he didn't have the ability to scrummage, do his work in the line out, maul, all of that. The nice to haves then is how explosive he is, and all the players have their different qualities. So it's really pushing their strengths while touching on their weaknesses.
How do you have to evolve, I guess, or probably rather, how do you have to adapt to different coaches? Because you have your philosophy. How much, and I guess let's talk Tigers specifically, because you came from a different environment that Steve came from. You will have fairly, I would imagine, robust conversations at times where you won't agree. and that's what you want. Let's be honest, we all want that in every department we're in. But how have you had to adapt? And let's talk specifics to Steve in some ways, because he's got his game plan and you've got to influence it, but also fit into it.
I don't know if it's influence or it's definitely fit in. If he's clear with me, and if all the coaches are really clear on what they need for this game plan of ours to be successful, I have to understand that, and then we have to mold the training around that to support that, you know. So as long as he's clear, which he is, as you can imagine, we know then what's really important. So what are our big cornerstones in our game? So what do we have to have? And then you have to figure that out and then program it as well as possible to make sure that everything is pointing in that direction. Probably the simplest way to say it is my own philosophy is, I suppose, you know, you have to train for the demands of the game. If our game style changes, well, then it has to change with it. You know, you have to be pretty flexible. I suppose that's where we are currently, you know, in the future, when we think we're exactly where we need to be for our game plan, and so we can maximize the way we play, then we have to address, well, how do we mitigate the way that the best of the opposition play? And I hope that makes sense, because like that's something that I'm very mindful of. You know, you can train as best you can to play the way you want to play, but at some stage you're going to have to address, you know, how do you combat the team that has unbelievable power? They have the kicking game, which means it's going to be extensive. You're going to be running back and forth. You know, at some stage you're going to have to address the opposition as well. So that's probably the next step for us.
So you are involved in the coaching team. So we'll touch on your departments if I think you said lead, but who have leads within them. But you are part of the coaching team as well, which is something we don't always see in terms of the people in your role. You're in every coach's meeting. You're in the game plan sessions. You're part of the recruitment process as well. Is that something that, without speaking out of turn, did you say, right, if you want me to come to Tigers, I want that? Or is that something where Steve went, this is what I want from you? Actually, I want you to evolve and be slightly more involved than maybe other head of physical performances are?
Yeah, I don't know, but others, it's something that Steve asked me to do. And I'll get involved in anything that he feels where I'm of benefit. So, you know, you touch on recruitment. There'll be some recruitment meetings I won't even open my mouth. You know, it's only if there's cake. You know, that's the only time I would. But yeah, look, it's one of those positions. I don't think you can have fitness coaches now. It doesn't work just to have a fitness coach who's not involved in there now. How we support the rugby and the game plan and how we want to play, I have to know that and I have to understand that. And then wherever I can contribute, I will. So if that means that I'm spending time with Brett or with Mike or with Matt or with Tom or with Steve, I'll do whatever Steve feels is beneficial. So if that means that I am doing, you know, I've been with the forwards now for the last couple of weeks while Matt Parr has been with the backs. And Matt, you know, he was a professional, you know, he played professional rugby as a prop. And you'd think, well, that doesn't make any sense. But if that's the best thing for the program at this time of the season, that's the best thing. So yeah, I'm happy to work and help out wherever Steve perceives that I can be of assistance, you know.
So before we do kind of move on to your staff in particular, as a final point, when you're working with these guys and kind of harping back to that first point of, you know, science and culture side of it, how much of it for you is up here? How much are you trying to get the guys to buy in up here? Because from the neck down, so to speak, they can train as hard as they want. If they're not buying in up here, there's no point, to be blunt, is there? There's just no point.
No. And that's the conversation we've had, you know, within the department. If there's no genuine intent there from the player, if he doesn't genuinely believe that what he's doing is going to be of benefit to him, and that it's not being selfish, but a player has to understand, you know, we're there to help the player. and by helping the player, you help the team and everything. But yeah, if they don't truly believe that what you're doing is going to be beneficial, so that's where things like the sand, if you can run up a sand dune. Are you going to get everything out that if you believe that it's the right thing to do? Probably not, do you? So no, you're totally right. We have to convince the players that it's the right thing to do, and if they're not convinced, we have to know that we really have to connect with the guys to maximize everything that we do.
That's the old. I think I said earlier this week you can lead a duck to water, but they have to drink. But actually, I found out it was lead a horse to water, so I got the quote wrong. Thank you to whoever pointed that out to me earlier this week, because the duck would probably already be in the water, wouldn't they? Not my finest hour.
Or in the air. The duck, if it's flying towards another summer.
I don't know that much about ducks, to be honest, mate. Do they fly towards summer? Is that what they do?
Yeah, Coley was telling me something about ducks.
Yes.
How mallards love the summertime.
Right. It's pentathlon and ducks for Coley.
Mallards in particular.
Mallards, right. You've seen The Office, the American Office. Anyway, it's not important. Right, we talked about your department. We've talked a lot about how players have had to buy into your way. Let's be honest, you're coming into a department as the new lead on, 3 or 4 kind of sub-departments that roll into one. What do you feel like the response, the reaction was from, staff who have had different leaders over long times, short times? You've got some new guys and girls in, you've got some people who've been here a long time, like you said. How do you feel the reaction's been to you and the way you've, I guess, had to change some things?
I'm not sure about the reaction that I've had. It's tough for me to answer that anyway, because they could be saying whatever they want behind my face, or behind my back even. Look, I was very lucky to walk into a club where we had pretty good people here already, and I've touched on Matt Parr played here. He knows rugby. I lean a lot on Matt. And he leads the strength and conditioning department really, really well. So there's massive credit for him in terms of how we turn out every weekend and how guys are physically progressing. You see some of the younger guys, they look different to when they did when I arrived, and that's massive credit to him. So we've got a new guy, James Nolan, an Irishman who's come in, probably the most chatty guy I've ever come across.
Absolute pest.
Isn't he? Brutal. Brutal. And if he's not doing the river dance, he's doing. No, but it's good. It's good to have characters. But we've got, so we've got really good guys across there, and ladies. But so I was really fortunate to come in. So have I done much to change? Not necessarily. We've just tapped into, I think, what was good in the first place and just amended. It's just been tweaking, really. The main emphasis has been what we do on the pitch and what we do there consistently well. So yeah, I've been very, very fortunate to come in and work with very, very experienced, very highly driven people anyway. So makes my life very easy.
You mentioned what we do on the pitch. So training aside, obviously you are someone that people see, like you say, fans unfortunately are at home, they can't be there. But at the moment, and you are like the players, you'll have to experience a full Matty Hollywood's Welford Road as opposed to the current kind of ghost town version we get on game day. But what is your role on match day? Because everyone sees you there on the sideline. You're obviously up and down, you're on the pitch, you really do run more than some players. But again, won't name names, but you get my point. What is your role? Because are you sending a message up to Steve and going, mate, we got to run at the 13 here, or we got to run at the 13 channel? Like, I'm intrigued from that side that he calls you a coach. Now, Mike Ford's sitting there with him talking defence. Tom Harrison's talking about the scrum. As you say, James, your SSC blog's just talking to a lamppost because they'll listen. But from the perspective of what are you sending up, or are you just the one kind of relaying his message?
Yeah, there's not constant, but there's good communication going on throughout the game. So There'll be myself, Brett Deacon, and Matt Parr who relay the messages during the game. But it's definitely two-way. I don't say anything if I don't need to say anything, you know. But it's sometimes the backs might have questions or asking, "What are you seeing? Are you seeing the same thing?" So there's that kind of two-way. What I look for is a bit about what we spoke earlier. How are the players working off the ball? So I look for that, and I look for the times, you know, where you see, okay, this guy looks like he's dropping off. He's missing. He's a little bit slow arriving, whatever. So they'll be the kind of conversations then I'll have. So it'll just be suggestions. Would you look at making this change? But it's Steve's decision inevitably anyway. I can only suggest, you know.
Are you one of those pitch side people that fourth officials can't stand?
No, I'm very well behaved. I'm very well behaved. Oh well, look, you know, you get wound up, don't you? And it's the nature of the beast, unfortunately, that you know, when you're on the end of a couple of disputable decisions, you know, you want to fight your corner. You know, if no one's going to fight your corner, no one will. So yeah.
That's a very diplomatic response. What about your interaction with opposition players? Now, let's talk in specifics here, because we have played teams that have guys you've worked with in. There's some Springboks World Cup winners. Are you, if you're running out there and you know, against Sale and there's Faf, are you having a pop at him? You telling him something, you know, to throw him off the game? Is there a banter element, or are you actually a little bit of, I don't want to upset someone I know could really have an influence on this game?
No, try not to. Look, if there's a natural interaction during the game, you know, you'll say whatever. But I don't really want to be known as that guy.
Yeah,
you know, talking throughout the game. I'm bad enough as it is. I'm annoying enough for our own dugout as it is. I think anyway. So no, I don't really go looking for it.
Tell me about Steve. And this, you mentioned before, he is very clear. He's very detailed. We talked to him last week about his perception of detailed. Everyone uses that word to describe Steve Borthwick. Everyone I've met, everyone I know that knows Steve says it. What's your perception? Is detailed a really good description of Steve Borthwick, and why, if so?
Yes, it is. It's detailed, and I hope it doesn't come across as being a slight for being anal, because it's not. Detailed is what he does really well is he preempts things.
Yeah,
and that's massive. That's so important here. So he will preempt things for the next game, and that might be on the Saturday. Immediately after this game, he's thinking already.
yeah.
So that's something where you need that, and you need that little prod, I think, to go, okay, what are the potential pitfalls? What are the potential issues that we could face next week? It's way easier to have that when someone's actually highlighted them before they even happen. In terms of the detail, then, yeah, it's just making sure that everything is right and everything is as it should, to make sure the performance is right at the weekend, or at least get us in the position to be winning games. So if that's what detailed means, yes, he's very detailed.
I thought it was fascinating last week. He spoke about detailed wasn't about giving people 10 pages of information. His job was to go through 10 and give them the exact amount they needed to be the best, to prepare the very best they can. Is there an element where you also might cipher some down from him? So if he provides you as coaches 5 pages of the 10 he's read, how much are you passing on? Or is your role to pass on everything? And that might be match day specific. If he yells down 3 or 4 orders, you might think, you know, let's just get these 2 first.
Yeah, I think specifically on match day, yeah, you have to filter, and I suppose with years of experience, you filter some of the information, because when you've got someone like a Wiggy or a George Ford out there, you know, they've already seen it. You know, typically you go on and they're like, yeah, we know, before you even get there. Or the one that I really enjoy is, you know, if there's a break in play as you're getting out to the backs, because I typically go to the backs, they're already discussing what Steve sent down.
Yeah.
So you don't have to say anything, but I suppose my role in meetings during the week, I know it's probably really annoying for some of the coaches, but is to question and not challenge necessarily. My rugby intellect isn't obviously anywhere close to what Steve, Mike, Matt, the coaches have. So if they can explain it to me, they can explain it to anyone. So I'll question and I'll want clarity on why. And then, as long as it's simple, well, then it should be very easily digestible.
Do you ever, and I know Steve made a reference to this last week, do you ever, sit there, think, I don't know what these guys are all talking about, specifically because they're all English in that room, let's be honest. Do you ever sit there and go, guys, I don't want to be rude, but, around my neck, World Cup medal, around your neck, no World Cup medal. I think I know what I'm talking about here.
Maybe 3 times a week.
And do you ever, if George, you get out there and George maybe hasn't had that conversation yet, you go, look, 40, I don't want to be rude, mate, but this is why we got you in Tokyo. This is why we had you under the cosh, because, mate, World Cup winner, silver medalist.
Do you know, I haven't even spoken about the World Cup.
Go away. You speak about the World Cup all the time. It does seem to me that Steve is quite bitter about that. As a proud Southern Hemisphere boy, I was happy to win another World Cup. Is that drawing a slight between? Does it ever come up? Is there and this actually leads into a more serious question. Is there ever a conversation about, Aled, could you explain something with the Springboks? Because it was an incredible World Cup campaign from the South African side that you were right in the thick of. Do you ever sit there and say to George, look, this is maybe something we did, or, Steve, X, Y, and Z, or Tom or Matt? Do you have those conversations too?
Yeah, and that's one of the really refreshing things about this coaching team. Steve's thirst for knowledge is massive. So he will ask, how did you approach this? And he does that regularly. And you look at the wealth of experience that he's got, but he's still really thirsty to learn and find out, well, what's the alternatives? All the coaches are the same. And when it's appropriate, I can suggest, well, look, this is how this was done.
Yeah.
Does it work here? That's not my decision, but I'll suggest, or I'll say, well, this is what an alternative, a possible alternative might be. So yeah, there's a bit of chat about it, but probably more out of interest than anything else.
Let's go quick fire on some things. Are you happy looking back from July 1st to now with where the squad is at in terms of what you were hoping and expecting at this point?
Quick fire, satisfied. It's probably where I expected us to be.
Yep.
But knowing full well that there's still a lot of room for growth anyway.
We've talked a lot about COVID. You and I have talked a lot about it off and on camera as well, and everyone's had this say, but I don't want to go too deep. But again, quick fire on it. How hard has it made what you're trying to do when you've had to have those restrictions in place around less days, maybe with guys, less big sessions, less bigger groups? How hard has that made it?
I've actually forgotten what it was like.
Yeah.
It's just the way we do it now, isn't it? So it'll be bloody nice when we get back to some form of normality, and our training week isn't dictated by when we're testing or what time we're testing or when we get the results. So yeah, really looking forward to when that happens. But at the moment, it's just normal. We're just making the best of it.
What about the young guys? You've seen a lot of young guys come through different groups. There's been a lot said about this kind of next gen of guys on their way up at Leicester, in particular those kind of core guys that have come through the academy system. I'm talking JVP, Whitcomb, Stewards. I'm missing a whole bunch, and I'm sorry for who I missed. But where do you see those guys in terms of how they rate against other young guys you've seen coming through? Because there's maybe some pressure that doesn't need to be on them being piled onto them because they're performing so well?
Yeah, it's geez, that's a good question. Now, they rank really highly,
Yeah.
and I suppose for the people, again, for everyone watching at home, you've seen the likes of JVP, and you might have seen Dan Kelly now because they've played, but you wouldn't have seen as much of guys like James Whitcomb, Cam Henderson, Ollie Chesum. Those guys were working bloody hard every single week, you know. It's not like they're just cruising through. Those guys are really, really working, and that's why they're putting pressure on other players when it comes to selection, you know, and that's what you want. Now, with everything that happened, you know, with COVID and followed with some players, you've seen the likes of Freddie Stewart be thrust in, but brilliant, isn't it? It's brilliant that those guys now, there's an expectation that when you are involved, that you play of a standard, because I don't want to talk for Steve or any of the coaches, but you're probably never going to look at a game and go, but he did okay for a 21-year-old or 20, you know, a 20-year-old. You go, no, he's playing. You expect a certain level, don't you? So that's where I'm really, really encouraged by that group.
If you're good enough,
I've gone off the quick fire there now, don't I? With my little.
In fairness
monologue.
for you, that's quite quick fire for you.
Yeah.
Leicester Tigers. It was criticised for not moving forward, maybe into the future, and that's what's had to happen. It's had to look forward, and that kind of goes in hand with those young guys. How have you felt about the way in which people who have been here a long time have accepted the need to change and move forward? Because you are a fresh face and an outside influence coming in. There's,
I'm not sure there's anything fresh about this face, man.
No, Sam Elliott, I was once told you look like an actor, Sam Elliott. So if anyone wants to Google him, have a look.
Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, the KFC guy, the Colonel, whoever you want to look like, it's fine. Go for it. But how have you felt? Because that was the perception. The club was stuck a little bit, not looking forward, not moving forward.
I genuinely don't know how to answer that, because I haven't felt any. What's the word? No one's held back from trying to move forward. What's a good word for that? No one's been restrictive. Is that even a word? My Welsh is coming through here now.
Say it in Welsh then. Just use the Welsh word for it.
The Welsh is getting worse as well. No,
you could just make it up. No one would know if you were using the right word or not, wouldn't
they? No, like everyone's on board.
Yeah.
You know, and that's nice, you know, because everyone's ambitious, yeah, because they know where we should be. So that's the exciting part.
I think Charlie
like holding us back a little bit, though.
I am.
Just a bit, yeah.
Wow.
Probably the right time to mention that.
That's this is war, is all I'm going to say. You've started a war. When Charlie Clare, when he re-signed, mentioned how there's a long process ahead. Steve's talked about patience. Various guys have too. How far on the journey are Tigers as to where you want to get them as a coach?
Who knows? It depends. And I know I've mentioned this word a couple of times. It depends if we've got thirst and an appetite to continue. It depends if some people are happy with what we've achieved now. Whatever we finish in the table this year is going to be a reflection of how hard we've worked, and how far we've developed. So yeah, it depends. It depends where the appetite is. If it's slow, then we have to respect that it's going to take time, and that's just a matter of fact. But it's only going to be slow as people want it to be. If we can keep on a consistent basis, and I know I harp on about consistency, if we can keep on driving things and not being satisfied, be a bit quicker.
Are you enjoying it? That's my final question. Are you enjoying it? Because you are a character, you are a very positive person, but are you actually deep down enjoying this job, enjoying this challenge, enjoying, everyone bags the cliche of it, but enjoying this journey, even personally, individually.
Yeah, definitely. Look, my positivity, and I'm glad that comes across. Like I can't fake that, that's just personality. If you don't enjoy something, well, if I don't enjoy something, I can't fake it. My face gives it away if I'm annoyed or disgruntled or whatever. Yeah, loving the journey. With myself and the wife, we're loving Leicestershire. It's it'll just be exciting to get everyone back into the stadium, won't it? It'll be exciting to get people in there and just hearing that crowd, because I've only heard it from the other side and it's not nice. So I'm looking forward to the vocal wave that goes through Matthew Woods Welford Road. So no, loving it, Sam.
Aled, I appreciate your time. You can go and enjoy that Guinness now. And everyone, I'm certain, appreciates you digging a little bit deeper on some of the stuff we've heard you talk about in the media and on LTTV. And I'm sorry, I'm deeply sorry that I'm holding you and the club back.
The anchor, that's what we call you.
Do you know what? I think it rhymes with that, but I'm not sure that's what you call me. There's probably one more letter in there, but we won't say it on LTTV tonight.
Yeah, the cake-faced anchor.
Rhymes with anchor. Thank you, Aled.